Sonia Bosinger.
Thank you. So tonight we're going to talk about that topic that you all as managers of a condo or homeowners association get all the time. This unit owner wants to get a 50-pound dog as an emotional support animal. Our documents say that we only allow dogs up to 25 pounds. We're just going to prohibit it as the board. Is that okay? No. And what we're going to hear tonight, I'm going to go over the fair housing process, some case law on it, and then I'm going to turn it over to CJ Miles, who works at the Fair Housing Continuum, who deals with all the complaints from those people who say the association discriminated against me by not allowing X, Y, and Z, and talk you through that process, because those real life stories are what makes this topic really interesting. How many of you read in the newspaper just the last couple days about the guy in, I believe it was Clearwater or St. Pete, that has the pet squirrel that's his emotional support animal? One? Anybody else read about it? We also hear about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which does not apply to our condos and HOAs unless in some capacity we hold ourselves out to the public. With fair housing, we actually have more strict standards and we have to allow those emotional support animals. And the old way of thinking was, well, if this animal is an emotional support animal, it has to be trained. That's not the case under fair housing. These animals do not require any sort of formal training or any sort of training whatsoever. They don't need to be certified. They don't need to provide any certificate that this animal has gone through anger management training or anything like that. The animal needs no certification.
It's a violation to discriminate against a person based on race, color, religion, national origin, gender, familial status, the presence of children under the age of 18, and persons with disabilities. 90% of my cases, or probably higher, is persons with disabilities. And then probably 75% of those are reasonable accommodations, and probably 65 to 80% of those are animal issues. Every day I get an animal case. I used to I had a presentation this morning I did with an apartment association, and I always told them about, I have this issue every day with the terrible P's, pools, pets, and parking, So I deal with that almost on a regular basis, We want to resolve the case before it gets to the Florida Commission, or before it gets to HUD, or before it gets to, the fact that we have to file in federal court. We had a service member that had lived in a condominium complex, and he had a pit bull, and he was diagnosed with PTSD, and the condo association requested documentation of his disability. He would provide that to them, and they wanted more and more and more. Finally, it got to the point where he just said, enough is enough, and he called me, and I started working with the condo association, but they weren't having any of that. So we finally I sent it over to Matt. Matt took it to court and won the case, and it's a very good case. In fact, I used that case with the Hahn case, It's a very good case to inform the association. This is what you can ask for, this is what you can not ask for, medical. They wanted his entire medical history, and they couldn't, you just can't ask for that, This woman called the Center for Independent Living, and she wanted help trying to get into a shelter. She said that she had been sexually abused by her roommate, her male roommate, and wanted to find a shelter to move in. But she needed a shelter that would accept animals because she has 2 pets. That's how she said it. I have 2 pets, Chihuahuas, the mother and the son, okay? And she refers to it as the mother and baby boy. I'm like, okay. So, and they talk, and they try to find her some type of somewhere to stay. They finally got in touch with the shelter, and the shelter says, yeah, we have a shelter. We have this shelter, and she could possibly come here if she qualifies for our program. However, she would have to put the dogs in a kennel. So after talking to them, then about 5 hours later, they put her in contact with me. Now, all of a sudden, these animals are not pets. That's the word she used in the morning. Now they're support animals, So she probably did a little internet research to find out how she can do it. They do that, you know. And now all of a sudden there's emotional support animals, you know. And I have her on the phone and she's telling me, you know, first thing she's mentioning to me, well, the ADA says this and the ADA, and I'm like, okay, that's time out, because I do not have jurisdiction under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You know, fair housing is residential property, you know, ADA commercial property, so I don't have jurisdiction there. So, you know, so I finally get her straight on that, and she's claiming that these are her emotional support animals. She went as far as to say, I cannot live without these animals, and my doctors has said that I will cut my wrist and kill myself if I don't have these animals with me. And I'm like, okay, you know, I mean, that's what I have to go through, you know. I know in my head that these are not emotional support animals. I know this, you know. But what am I going to do, you know? And she tells me on the phone, oh, by the way, my doctor will write me a letter stating that. So all of a sudden, it comes up, my doctor will write me a letter, you know? And I'm like, okay, you know. So what happens if the doctor writes the letter? Okay, then you got to make a decision. What are you going to fight it or what? Because she will probably file a complaint with Florida Commission and say that she's being discriminated against. And based on the letter that the doctor provides, you know, she will probably win her case. She will probably win.
That when you said a lot of associations just capitulate and don't even talk to their attorney about it, I think that's a mistake. It's something you said, too, that when I get these requests, I immediately, you know, assuming we get some paperwork from a health professional, I immediately, and recognizing they don't have to sign anything, I immediately go to them with a settlement agreement, outlining all this stuff. This is my reasonable accommodation. The animal's name is this. The name of the veterinarian is this. The phone number of the veterinarian is this. I promise, I agree they won't cause a nuisance. I agree they won't be vicious. And that, I think, serves two purposes. One, it forces them to have a little bit of a come to Jesus moment that says they're signing their name to this, and this better be real. Two, it protects the association from selective enforcement, and it addresses the problem you just mentioned without having to fall back on the condo docs, which I think, you know, that's an easy case already, I mean. But, but I think, and, you know, most of the time, the owners will sign that.
Yeah.
Well, and Seth, to that, we have one client in Cocoa Beach that actually went to Taylor and Carl's before it became part of Becker and Poliakov, and had them draw up a document and asked them to put together a registration form for ESAs and service animals, not because they wanted to limit them, but because they were concerned that because they have a 40-pound weight limit, that they have condo commandos who would approach them in the breezeways or in the common areas and say, your dog is overweight, you need to get rid of that dog. And they wanted to be able for the board to know, there's a dog, this is the dog, this is the dog's picture, this is the dog's license, and they have their shots and they're registered with the association as an ESA, and so we let it be known to the community that if you question whether a dog should be on the site because they look like or act like they're outside the governing documents, you can talk to the board or management, because we've asked all those people, no, they're not required to, but we do ask them for their own sake to register the dogs with us. We don't ask them for a lot, just the picture of the dog and some reasonable reason why they're an ESA or a service animal, so that we can justify to such and such that instead of a 40-pound dog, you've got a 120-pound dog. And yes, this is a dog that we know about. It's a service animal or an ESA, leave it alone. And leave the people that are touching it alone. You know?
The last thing I'll say before we close up shop is if you have a board that has at least one board member who's the loudmouth that's going to talk to people in the elevators and yell at them and say, you don't look disabled to me, because I've had that case where the Florida Commission on Human Relations files the complaint for discriminatory behavior by one board member, and the association was held liable because of that one statement for discriminatory action. Saying that because these are the disabilities you cannot see. you're not going to be able to see them. So if you have those boards with that one member or those multiple members that are bound to make those comments, have a sit down with you and legal counsel where you can have it closed door, call it potential litigation meeting, and have your attorney educate them and say, this is what you can be held liable for, so let's make sure we have our ducks in a row. I know you believe this is a fake service animal, I get that, but they've provided us enough documentation that you're going to have to move past it, or you can still get the association held liable for these actions. So just, if you have those, have a sit down. I feel like 80% of my job, I'm sure Seth feels the same way, we have turned into therapists / psychologists for a lot of the board members. I'm sure you all see it. We are talking people off the ledge almost daily, I would say. So we're happy to do that at any point. But please take advantage of your counsel and have those meetings so you don't get your boards in trouble. And I thank you so much, CJ, for coming.
Okay, by all means,